evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is leading aircraftsman Chris Maciejowski. We warmly welcome the family of Lieutenant Charles Darrell Merritt, whose story will be told shortly. We are honoured to acknowledge Air Vice Marshal Timothy Charles Innes and the accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL and Services Club Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors, and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, Umina Public School, Umina Beach, and Our Lady of the Rosary Primary School from Wyoming. From Victoria, Waiganya Primary School. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. And they provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. Please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Charles Merrett. Charles Merrett was born in Melbourne suburb of Hawthorne in 1894, one of 3 children of Lieutenant Colonel Charles and Annie Merrett of Brighton, Victoria. He attended Melbourne Grammar Preparatory and Senior School before going on to work for his father at Welch, parent and CEO machinery merchants and manufacturing representatives. Charles's father was the commanding officer of the 5th Light Horse Brigade in Victoria. He followed his father's example of service in the militia, gaining commission as a lieutenant in the 51st Battalion, Albert Park Infantry Regiment, as Australia went to war in 1914. Both father and son were excited by the prospects of volunteering for the Australian Imperial Force, but were frustrated that, at the time, neither could serve overseas. Lieutenant Colonel Merritt was the oldest serving light horse officer and was prevented from sailing for Egypt because of his age, serving instead on the selection committee for officers of the expeditionary forces. Although an officer in the militia, Charles Merritt was too young to apply for commission in the Australian Imperial Force. Having gained an aero certificate at the Central Flying School at Werribee in Victoria, Charles sought leave from the Defence Department and travelled to England to gain flying boat experience before applying for a commission in the AIF. Once in England, Charles Merritt was immediately found suitable for the Royal Naval Air Service, which at the time was entrusted with the Air Defence of London. Coinciding with his arrival in England in January 1916 were the first German Zeppelin raids on southern England, dropping bombs on Great Yarmouth, Sherrington and King's Lynn in Norfolk. Before techniques were developed for taking off and landing on ships, the Royal Naval Air Service used seaplanes from bases along the English coastlines to counter the German Zeppelin threat. Almost immediately, the Australian Defence Department cancelled Merritt's leave and gave him a commission in the newly formed Australian Flying Corps, and instructions to wait in England for the arrival of the AFC squadrons. He was nominally attached to No. 1 Squadron, which had been raised at Point Cook near Melbourne earlier that month. Although the squadron would later go on to fly in the Sinai-Palestine campaign and was never based in England. Nonetheless, Charles received air flight training with both the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Air Service, logging time with an RFC training squadron at Farnborough before proceeding to the Royal Naval Air Service station at Dover. There he continued his flight training until the AFCF squadrons arrived later that year. On the 16th of May 1916, Charles Merritt was in the front seat in an Avro 504 twin-seater with a more experienced instructor when mechanical failure occurred. The instructor had switched off engine in order to land the aircraft, but found it too short of the runway. He attempted to switch the engine back on again, which it failed to do. Despite the efforts of the instructor to adjust the petrol, the Avro trainer stalled and dived nose first into the ground from a height of about 25 meters. Although the instructor survived, Charles was killed instantly, becoming the second Australian Flying Corps fatality of the First World War. Aged 21 at the time of his death, his body was recovered from the wreckage and buried at St. James Cemetery at Dover, where he rests today. Charles Merritt is listed on the Roll of Honor on your left, along with around more than 60,000 hours from the First World War. His photograph is displayed beside the pool of reflection. He is just one of many stories of courage and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Charles Merritt and all of the Australians who have given their lives in service of our nation.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow never old, as we left behind grow old. it shall not wither them, nor their ears condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Careful, party, green set, up!
Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We'd like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.